like, and subscribe. And this is a classic episode rant, right? You guys remember it. Dance Mania. Cosby Show. Season 4, episode 11, right? Yeah, and man, this is a tough one. It's a tough one right here. Oh, man. I guess we got to talk about envy today, right? Envy. Now, envy is often confused with jealousy. I guess we can talk about the difference real quick before I give the breakdown, right? Let me bring up the definition, right? You guys see it right there. Envy, right? A painful or unhappy feeling when you see someone else have a good thing, skill, or success and you wish you had it too, right? Now, jealousy is being mad that someone is trying to get something that you already have. You feel me? Let me give you an example, I guess. Like a pro quarterback, or all-pro quarterback, right? He may have won 3 Super Bowls, but when that rookie gets drafted, that all-pro quarterback is not the biggest fan of that rookie because he feels threatened. See, he's jealous by his position, right? He's not envious. He's jealous, right? A quarterback that has never won anything, of course, would be envious, right? And it all leads to this episode, right? Oh, man, like I said, this is a tough one. Before we get into this episode, of course, right? We need to understand exactly, like, how close Theo Huxtable and Walter Bradley, better known as Cockroach, really were, right? Like, man, Cockroach, he wasn't just another kid that Theo occasionally hung around at school. That was his best friend. You're going to hear that throughout this episode. Like, it's my best friend. This is my best friend, right? Like, they studied together. They chased girls together. You know, they got in trouble together. And they spent so much time at the Huxtable house that he's an extended family member, basically, right? Claire and Cliff know him. The sisters know him. They're comfortable with him. You know, he could just walk into that house. You know, whenever Theo had a plan, Cockroach was usually standing right beside him, right? Their friendship was built on loyalty, laughter, you know, the belief that no matter what happens, they're going to experience it together, right? It's safe to say that Theo and Cockroach was a package deal, right? But that's what makes this episode so important, because after this episode, we never see Cockroach again, right? He never returns to the Huxtable house. He wasn't around for Theo's graduation or college years. One of the closest friendships in the entire series ends with no explanation. But don't worry, that's why you click this video, because I'll explain the whole deal and what actually happened after this episode, right? I'll let you know exactly why we never see Cockroach again. I'll let you know that. That's what rants do, right? If you didn't know, Cockroach is actually my cousin, Walter. That's my cousin, Rant's cousin. Neither here nor there, though, right? But let's get into the episode. And we see Claire walking in, and she says, "Hi, Theo." And Theo says, "Hey, Mom." And Claire says, "I discovered something very interesting. My hairdresser, Antoine, does the hair for the producer of Dance Mania." And Theo says, "Dance Mania? The kids that dance on that show are the best." And Claire says, "Yeah, he said it's popular." And Theo says, "Oh, it is. One time Cockroach and I went to get tickets and they had a 2-year waiting list." And Claire says, "That's terrible. That reminds me, as I was leaving, he gave me these. Do you know anybody who'll be interested?" And Theo opens the envelope and says, Mom, are these 2 tickets to Dance Mania? Mom, these are 2 tickets to Dance Mania. And then he hugs and spins his mother, about to give her a heart attack, right? And then he says, "If you and Dad ever go broke, you can come to me for anything." And Claire is rich, right? She says, "Thank you, Theo." And Theo says, "Cockroach is coming over. He'll go nuts when he sees these." And Claire says, "Oh, I'm leaving before he can thank me." And Theo is excited, right? But then he hears the doorbell ring and he already knows it's Cockroach, right? So he's playing it cool, you know, acting all cool. He's like, "What's up, Cockroach? Hey, Cockroach, look at me. What do you see?" And Cockroach says, I see Theo. And Theo says, what you see is your best friend, and hands him the tickets, right? And Roach naturally says, what are these? And Theo says, nothing but 2 tickets to Dance Mania. And Cockroach says, the television show? And Theo says, that's right. We'll be dancers on Dance Mania. They tape the show Saturday. And Roach says, you could have asked anyone. Why me? And Theo says, Cockroach, you're my best friend. And Roach says, I'm touched, really. And he's excited, right? And Theo says, it's all right, you cool. And Roach says, look, we got to make the most of this opportunity. We need to work on some dance moves, you know? And Theo says, yes, this is our chance to become immortal. And Roach says, yeah, after this, we can talk to any girl we want. All we gotta say is, you know, we're the guys from Dance Mania. And Theo says, no, we won't even have to do that. They'll know. They'll point at us and say, it's them. We'll be the best dancers in the history of that show. Like you said, we just gotta practice our moves. And Roach says, Theo, do you think there's a chance we might get to dance with? And they both get up and say, Tina Hunter. And Theo says, we'll be dancing in the same room with her. And Roach says, yeah, breathing the same air. And then they both began chanting, Tina, Tina, Tina. See, they're little poon hounds, right? And now we see Theo on the phone talking to Diane, a hot honey from school. And he's telling her, hey, this is Theo. I'm in your homeroom. Listen, Diane, do you own a VCR? Well, good. Plug it in Monday night, because my best friend and I, Cockroach, is going to be on Dance Mania. And Diane goes crazy. You can hear it over the phone, right? And Theo says, oh yeah, Diane, make sure you tell all of your girlfriends. And Theo says, oh, hold on, Cynthia Morris is over there? And Cockroach says, oh, word? Let me talk to her. And Roach, he's spitting, right? He says, Cynthia, you and I don't know each other, right? We don't really know each other very well at all, right? But all of that can be changed. See, me and Theo, we're going to be on Dance Mania. So I'm going to offer you a chance to get in on the ground floor. How would you like to date me before I become famous? And Roach tells Theo, you know, she got so excited, she pulled the phone out. In all actuality, she hung up on him, right? And Rudy asks, when are you going to practice your dancing? And Theo says, well, we could practice now, you know, and finish up the phone calls later after dinner. And Rudy says, well, I'll practice with you guys. And Theo says, no, see, this isn't time for play. And Rudy says, well, you're going to need a girl, you know, for your partner. And Theo says, well, that don't really matter, because regardless of the girl, we're going to do our own little kid and play style dance, right? And Roach says, yeah, we're going to do our own routine as soon as we get our little camera time. And then they show Rudy the dance. And I was actually going to narrate this part, but I actually recorded it for you guys, so I'll play it for you. And now we're at the studio. The green room to be exact, right? And Cockroach says, check it out. Food, drinks, and tremendous looking women. And Theo says, Cockroach, I think I found out what heaven looks like. And Roach like, be cool. You know, we got to act like we've been here before. And Theo sees a mid-80s baddie. He says, hi there. And Roach says, nice outfit. And they're eating it up, right? Theo says, man, this is what life's all about. And Theo's about to help himself to some free food. And Roach says, don't eat anything. We have to stay light on our feet. And Theo says, good thinking. I'll have a diet soda then. And now the producer walks in and he tells everyone to line up, and he has to choose the dancers for the show's second batch, right? And they rush in line, and Roach says, when we're inside, try to move toward the front of the dance line so we're on camera. And then Tina Hunter walks in, right? And Theo tells Cockroach, she's here. Tina's here. And Tina walks through the line, of course, saying, excuse me. And Roach says, oh my God, she spoke to me. And the producer says, let's see, and starts picking random people, like he's trying to like he's running Studio 54 or something, right? He only picks 3 damn people, right? Meaning that line that he told them to form, it had no value with who's going to be picked. It was a setup, right? He picks 3 damn people and says, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for today. Thanks for coming. And Theo and Roach, they run up to the producer. They like, oh, nah. They rush him, right? They like, oh, nah, you can't let us in. And the producer says, look, we've reached our limit. And Roach says, yeah, but we have tickets. And the producer says, yeah, all these people do. See, we have to limit the dancers due to fire laws. And Theo says, we're not going to start any fires. And Roach says, yeah, we don't even smoke. And the producer says, look, rules are rules. Now Roach is desperate, right? He's resorting to plan C. He's like, look, we have connections. His mom, hairdresser, knows the producer. And the producer says, look, I'm just doing my job. And Theo says, you got to use us. Look at these outfits. And Roach says, look, we have moves. He's moved on to plan D now, right? He's like, look, we have moves. And they proceed to do their little dance. And the producer gets a call on his headset, right? He's like, all right, cool. All right, look, I got good news for you guys. I have room for 1 more dancer. And Theo says, 1? And Roach says, no way, man. We're a team. And Theo says, yeah, we're together. And the producer says, look, I'm sorry. Only 1. Who will it be? And Theo says, Cockroach, you go, man. And Roach says, nah, you should go. And Theo says, nah, go ahead, man. And Roach says, look, you got the ticket. And the producer, his patience is thin. He says, guys, I gotta get inside. Make a decision. And Theo says, Cockroach, go ahead. And Cockroach says, okay, see ya. And walks right on in, right? And Theo is left looking crazy with that purple trench on, right? And he's watching the live taping of this show. And like I said, I was going to actually narrate this, but I recorded this one for you guys too. So enjoy.
It's Dance Mania!
Now we're at school Monday morning and Theo and Cockroach walks in, right? And the student says, hey Theo, hey Cockroach, the new TV stars. Everybody's going to be watching Dance Mania tonight. And little white Darlene says, yeah, I invited my girlfriends over to watch. And Smitty asks, can we come over too? And Darlene says, sure, I guess so. And everybody is hyped. They're like, all right, party at Darlene's. And Darlene asks, can you both come? Of course, talking to Theo and Cockroach. And Roach says, yeah, we'll be there. And Smitty asks Theo, so tell me what it was like. Were you nervous? And Theo says, oh, I didn't get on. And Smitty says, tragic. And Theo says, Cockroach did. And the group asks, so, you'll be on tonight? And Roach says, yeah, definitely. And one of the students asks, hey, did you see Tina? And Roach said, see her. I danced with her. And Jerry Curl says, you did? Oh, I don't believe it. And Yellow Shirt say, your reputation is set for life. And Smitty says, I'll pay $1 million to be you for 1 day. And trust, anybody that know, Smitty has that 1 million, right? Let's not pretend, right? But Roach says, listen, I got on the show because of Theo. They only had room for 1 more dancer and he insisted I go into the studio. And Yellow Shirt says, that's nice. All right, so tell us what Tina was like. And Roach says, she's sweet. She had a great personality and she's not stuck up. And of course, Theo is salty, right? And Smitty says, man, one day you may marry Tina. And Roach says, it's funny you say that. She mentioned she would like to have children one day and she was looking right at me when she said it. And Theo's mind is already made up. He's already made up his mind. He's like, yeah, I'm never hanging with this dude again, right? And now we see Theo, he's salty as a pretzel, watching TV, he's watching a Western movie, right? And Vanessa and Rudy comes in and they says, Theo, it's almost 7 o'clock, change the channel. And Theo says, oh, I'm watching a movie. And Rudy says, come on, Dance Mania is coming on, change it. And grabs the remote and Theo says, Rudy, look what you did. You turned the TV off. You can't tell me to change the channel. I was here first and I'm watching this movie. And Vanessa says, but we want to see Cockroach dance. And Theo says, there's a TV upstairs in Mom and Dad's room. And Vanessa says, we want to watch it down here though. And Theo says, Vanessa, I'm not moving. You know what your problem is? You two are the most inconsiderate people I've ever known. All you do is think about me, 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 me. You two are disgusting. And Vanessa says, I thought you wanted to see Cockroach on Dance Mania. And Theo says, I saw it when they taped it. It's silly. If you want to waste your time, be my guest. And gives them the remote, right? And Vanessa says, well, I will. And Theo's mad. He says, Vanessa, you know something? You're a jerk. And Vanessa says, you're a bigger jerk, prick. I didn't do a damn thing to him, Rudy. And Theo is walking upstairs and he slips on one of Rudy's toys and he's mad. And Theo says, Rudy, I've told you not to leave toys laying around. It's very dangerous. Toys on the floor is the top cause of American household injuries. And Vanessa says, who told you that? And Theo says, it's a fact, okay? And Rudy says, it's no fact, jerk. And Theo is furious. He says, it's not enough that you would try to delete me with this toy, but you insult me too? And Rudy says, you should have watched where you was going. And Theo's proving that hurt people, right? He says, oh yeah? Well, you should watch where this is going. Then he goes and tosses Rudy's toy out in the street and it causes a mild accident where Rudy's toy gets crushed, right? And Rudy's like, Theo? And then she goes and cries to her mother, right? And Vanessa says, oh, now you're going to get it, you maniac. And Theo says, maniac? I'll throw you out there too. And Vanessa runs to her mother now, right? And Claire comes out. She's like, what's going on out here? And Rudy says, Theo threw my phone out and it got crushed. And Vanessa says, now he's threatening us. And Theo says, I'm sitting here trying to watch TV and they started harassing me. And Cliff rushed out and says, hey, I'm trying to take a math test. And Claire says, Theo, go get Rudy's phone. I don't want any more trouble. And Vanessa says, come on, Rudy, Dance Mania is starting. And the family is gathered around, right? And Claire says, Walter's mother is very excited. I spoke to her earlier. And Cliff says, yes, indeed, Dance Mania. Tina, my woman. And Claire gives him a look, right? Because, you know, them Huxtable women are very insecure, right? Everybody knows that, right? And Rudy says, look, there's Cockroach. And everybody is cheering. And Cliff says, he's dancing with Tina, that lucky dog. And Theo is salty. He says, how am I supposed to watch this with everybody talking? And Vanessa says, shh. And Theo says, don't tell me to shh. I'll talk when I want. And Claire says, Theo, stop it now. And Theo says, Dad, I was watching a movie. You let Rudy and Vanessa come down here and have their way. They always have their way. I never have my way. Dad, I almost broke my neck on Rudy's phone. And I'm the one suffering for it. And Cliff tells Theo, like, look, close my door. You know, and Theo, he's at wits and he says, fine. You know, I'll just go in the kitchen. I don't need to look at some idiot box to have a good time. And Vanessa's cheering Cockroach on. She's like, all right, good move. And Theo elbows the kitchen door hard, right? And walks in the kitchen. And Cliff was about to go in there and put hands on Theo. But Claire stopped Cliff and she walked in instead. And Claire walks in and she says, Theo, I get the feeling that something's troubling you. I like to help you out, but you gotta help me. Who or what has upset you? Is it me, your dad, Rudy's toy phone, the people at Dance Mania, Cockroach? And Theo says, Mom, can I be upset without knowing what I'm upset about? And Claire says, could it be you're upset because Cockroach is on TV with Tina and you're here with a bag of pretzels, salty? And Theo says, that has something to do with it. And Claire asks, why did he get on and you didn't? And Theo says, look, the stage manager said that they could only take one more person. I said, Cockroach, you go. Roach said, you got the ticket, so you go. And Claire asks, so why didn't you go? And Theo says, that wasn't supposed to be the end of our conversation. See, I was going to say, I know I got the tickets, but you go. Then Cockroach was supposed to say, no, Theo, you go. Then I was going to say, okay, but Cockroach said okay first. And before I know it, he's dancing with Tina. And Claire says, so what you wanted was for you to be dancing and Cockroach to be watching. And Theo says, that's how it would have been if Cockroach wasn't selfish. And Claire asks, so you're upset with Cockroach? And Theo says, yeah. And Claire says, why take it out on us? And Theo says, because Cockroach doesn't live here. And Claire says, you shouldn't be upset with Cockroach either. And Theo says, he aced me out of a great opportunity. And Claire says, you aced yourself out. You took the gamble that on the third time Cockroach would say no. But that didn't happen. And you lost. See, you should have been honest with Cockroach and said, yo, bro, out my way. My woman Tina is waiting for me. See, then there wouldn't have been any gamble. And Theo says, I don't think I would have felt right saying that. And Claire says, that's how you felt. Now you're angry because you didn't say that. If you want to be angry with yourself. Don't take it out on us because we'll get angry back. And Theo says, fine, I'll be cool. And Claire says, thank you. Next time you give somebody something, do it because you want to. Don't expect anything in return. And Claire go back to watching Dance Mania. And we see Cockroach doing his Chris Brown dance moves. And the average person thinks Theo stopped hating, right? But it's safe to say, that wasn't the case because as we already know, Cockroach was never seen after this episode, right? And the episode ends with Theo sitting at home watching Dance Mania on television, right? And Theo tries to watch and be supportive, but deep down, something has changed. See, because that was supposed to be both of them, and that's how Theo truly feels, right? And even though Cockroach wasn't responsible for that decision, he became the face of Theo's humiliation. See, you gotta think about it like this. What about the following day at school? Yeah, Cockroach, when he arrives, he's a celebrity now. Students surround him in the hallway. Everybody wants to know what the studio was like. Girls who barely noticed him before suddenly wants his attention, right? Everybody is congratulating him and repeating his name all day. And Theo is no longer the one half of Theo and Cockroach. They're no longer that package deal that we mentioned in the beginning of this episode, right? It changes overnight, right? Somebody probably asked Theo why he wasn't dancing beside Cockroach. Another student may have joked that Cockroach had carried their routine during the audition, right? Cockroach might have even tried to defend Theo, but by then, the damage was already done. Theo would laugh along and pretend that it didn't bother him, right? But every joke added on another layer of resentment. And then Dance Mania invited Cockroach back, and that was the final straw. Ladies and gentlemen, that was why you never saw them two click tight ever again. When Dance Mania invited him back, Theo was like, oh wow, life can really change with one decision. See, because everybody knows what happens to Cockroach after that, right? He becomes a Hall of Fame hip-hop dancer. He trains Chris Brown. Come on now. Take you down. I really want to take you down. Show you what it's all about. Come on now, Chris Breezy. You got my attention. You're making me want to say, oh. He's training that. Not the singing, because that's God's gift. But the dancing came from Cockroach. Everybody knows it. You guys saw the most recent BET Awards, right? You saw it when they did the tribute for him. He even got the Lifetime Achievement Award. He did his dance and all that. Come on now, Rants don't lie. But yeah, you never saw them two together again. I ain't even gonna lie. I don't even want to do all that. But Cockroach didn't even go to Theo's funeral. Sad. That's my cousin though. You know, I know he gonna be mad I said all that, but it's sad though, man. Y'all let that little cruddy stuff get in between y'all, and it's just ridiculous, man. You could at least paid your respects, cuzzo. Sad, man. But yeah, Dance Mania, Randumb Rants. Like and subscribe.